And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking the Mexican Grand Prix. This is our preview. The championship is hotting up. It is getting hot to touch in one corner. We have the championship leader, Oscar Piastri. In the other, we have Lando Norris. And in the third corner, because this is a triangle ring apparently, we have Max Verstappen catching them, hunting them down, like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, as Crofty always said. But this is our Mexican Grand Prix preview. We'll be having a look at the track, some of the news, the big story going in. And obviously, as I mentioned, who's going to win? So it is officially a race week for the Mexican Grand Prix this weekend. It's a double header. And, well, who is going to win Mexico? I put it to you that it's going to be one of those people on that Mexican Grand Prix flag, as Max Verstappen, probably the favourite, especially when you look at the history of the Mexican Grand Prix. But, even though, I said Oscar Piastri last time, so how wrong was I in terms of being a favourite? I thought Piastri was going to nail the American Grand Prix, the United States Grand Prix in COTA. He didn't, did he? No, very much not so. But last time out in Mexico, it was this man, Carlos Sainz, winning. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. What a win. I do believe this is Ferrari's last win, I think, as well. But there he is, Carlos Sainz. What a difference 12 months makes, because he's now been hit with a 5-second penalty. That's simply because of the issues he had in the USA. Whoops-a-daisy. Both Williams, shocking. But yeah, Carlos and, what was it, Kimi Antonelli. We did a whole rundown of their whoops-a-daisy accident. But he has a 5-place grid penalty, which is not particularly great. I do think Williams will still do fairly okay, if I'm honest. They got Albon. If he puts his head together, we know how good he can be. But we'll talk about that in the predictions. But let's now look at the multiple Grand Prix winners in Mexico. And it's very much Max Verstappen from Holland that reigns supreme with 5. Jim Clark on 2, Alain Prost on 2, Nigel Mansell on 2, and Lewis Hamilton on 2. We've got a few ones, for example, like Carlos Sainz, but these are the top 5. Max Verstappen, 5 Mexican Grand Prix victories. I mean, yeah, we know Red Bull normally go really well here as well. So, now, speaking of news, FP1 big news, because Vesti is going to drive for Mercedes in the Mexican Grand Prix in FP1, but he is not the only one. We have Ayawasa. Probably got that wrong. He's going to drive for VCARB in the Mexican Grand Prix FP1. And Antonio Fiocco, I'm sorry, Antonio, but he also is going to drive for Ferrari. I believe he's taken over Lewis Hamilton's seat in FP1. And also, I told you there's a few. We've got Paul Allen to drive for Alpine FP1 at the Mexican Grand Prix. I think he's taken over Gasly's seat. So, how many of these are we going to see in Formula 1 maybe next year or the next couple of years? Who knows? I have absolutely no idea. But for my Mexican Grand Prix preview, moving on. I did have the headlines, didn't I, somewhere? There we go. There it is. So moving on. Is Oscar Piastri under pressure going into the Mexican Grand Prix? I put it to you, he is. As you know, the last few races have been absolutely bang average for, well, really, Oscar Piastri. The last time he was on the podium, was it as far back as Zandvoort when he won there? When, sadly, Lando Norris, who has 15 podiums so far, which is not bad, ended up blowing up his engine. Well, his engine blowing up. I don't really think it was his fault. But this is this is from Twitter, link in the description. I thought this was quite funny, but this is what the McLaren drivers potentially feel. I think they're trying to keep it nice and cool, aren't they? They're kind of like a duck. It's all calm and serene on top of the water, but underneath paddling away like anything, and I'm sure that's what McLaren are feeling at the moment. Are they losing control of this championship? I know. I mean, just when you look at it, for Oscar Piastri, points since Baku 22. Carlos Sainz, yeah, I know. He was very much helped by that podium, but still, points since Baku 22. Yeah, it's not particularly great. And this is how Verstappen's title deficit has come down from nearly, from over 100 points to now just 40 Most of it since, you know, pretty much the summer break. And if I was McLaren, I'd be nervous. That Red Bull does look very fast. And the other thing, Max is on form. Even Helmut Marko came out, and if you remember, he kind of said Max kind of lost his way. He was really into the GT. That's when he got into, obviously, driving a GT car, because Formula 1 he wasn't winning. Wow. And he's now obviously refound this form. I mean, I get it. He's a guy that's used to winning. He can't win all the time, though, sadly. But now he has the car. I mean, it shows you. And this year, if anything, in the year 24 and 25, and, you know, even with the Lewis Hamilton, shows you if you can be the best driver in the world, but if you don't have the car, it is not happening. McLaren have had the car for most of the season. Red Bull now look on par, if not maybe a tiny bit faster, who knows? But it's going to be really interesting, these next 5 rounds. And when we look at the driver standings, Oscar Piastri on 346. Lando Norris only now 14 points behind. If you remember, he was a lot more, wasn't he? On 332, Max on 306. I mean, it is looking extremely close. And now Idrik Hajar is just about in the top 10. And Nico Hulkenberg is now as well on 41. Well done. Well, I mean, absolutely well done to them. But let's talk about, as they have here, this is the, I think, some Australian newspaper. What is it? News.com.au. And I thought they are talking about it today. Insecure Oscar Piastri called out as major flaw exposed. Yeah, I know. If that's not clickbait, I don't know what it is. But let's have a look at it. So, as we know, he has very much, Oscar, has been given an absolutely brutal reality check in these last few races. He was the Iceman. Everyone said he was the Iceman, the king of cool, and he absolutely was at the beginning of the year. In particular, fighting with Max Verstappen. He fought with Max Verstappen much better, for example, than Lando Norris did. Maybe even better than Lewis did at times. So, Oscar Piastri has been labelled insecure with the Drivers' Championship slipping through his fingers. I wouldn't say it's slipping yet. Well, is it slipping maybe? Not completely, he still has hold of it. I mean, let's be honest, he's still in the lead of the championships. But his F1 lead has been slashed to just 14 points. That's with Lando Norris, and 40 points with Max Verstappen. So he's now gone, and this is interesting, he has gone 4 races without finishing on the podium. And reigning champion Max Verstappen is now just a simple 40 points behind Piastri, and he's well and truly in the mix. Now, Max can still win all the races, and if Oscar finishes second, I think he can't quite do it. So it is potentially not completely in Max's hand. Some may say it's only a matter of time. Now, Verstappen scored 119 out of a maximum 133 points in the last 5 race weekends. I mean, that's almost perfection, isn't it? Not quite, but that is scary. And Piastri's teammate Lando Norris, as we've mentioned, he's only 14 points. And the sad thing is, yes, Piastri's in the lead, but the argument you can make is that Lando is the on-form driver at the moment. Does McLaren face some tough decisions in the closing stages? Maybe, but both of them are more than capable of winning the championship, at least mathematically. And suddenly, Piastri is looking the more fragile of the 2 McLaren drivers. Normally, you'd say it would be Lando Norris, but no. And it's something that's been highlighted by former F1 driver Timo Glock. So, Glock ended his career with 1 podium finish, okay? And he says the entire McLaren outfit is beginning to look a bit shaky. And, well, yeah, I mean, he's insecure. At least that's the opinion of Timo Glock. In his 3rd year in Formula 1, and let's be fair, other people, including Lando, have got much more experience than Piastri. And the fact that Piastri is leading the championship with just 3 years in is absolutely fantastic. Could Max have done it 3 years in? We'll never know. But Max, I do think Max was obviously a lot younger, but Piastri is a lot mature. Well, more mature 3 years in than, for example, Max Verstappen was 3 years in. But I digress. So in his 3rd year, he's in a situation where the pressure is growing. The free driving from the beginning of the year is no longer easy. He was just as critical in his assessment, Glock was, of the McLaren garage. He said the nervousness is there for the whole team. Proof maybe in the fact that they seem to be messing up pit stops a lot. And he's saying that the problem is there are racetracks where Mercedes and Ferrari are suddenly quite strong. For example, you need to look at Singapore for Mercedes. Ferrari were fairly strong, at least they were in between both McLarens at Austin. And that's potentially going to be the problem for Oscar and Lando, and potentially Max. But he's saying Max is too dominant for anyone to put him under pressure. I don't quite agree with that. We know that under pressure, Max is very good, but everyone cracks. If you look for example, Abu Dhabi 2021, the start, when Max should have got the good start on the softer tyres, he didn't do it, and he was completely beaten, obviously, until the end. That whole weekend, and that would have been so much. That would have been the last time we've seen Max under an amazing amount of pressure. Obviously, he's matured since then, so it would be interesting to see. Now, it says Monday's race, but it wasn't. It was Sunday's, but this is Australia. It was the fourth consecutive race where Verstappen has out-qualified and outscored both McLaren drivers. Croft summed it up after the race, saying, "I keep getting reminded of that scene in Jurassic Park. Two people sat in a Jeep trying to escape the dinosaurs, and there's a T-Rex charging after them." Yeah, I mean, that's not looking good. But Verstappen apparently, but according to one bookmaker, is now equal favourite for the title. So there is hope, though. Jenson Button's come out with a few nice things to 2009 champion, and he's offered some advice. As we know, he's currently in an intense battle, is Oscar, and heading into the Mexican Grand Prix. There are questions, I think, that Oscar Piastri needs to answer. Button discussed the tricky situation on the Sky Sports F1 broadcast. He said, "Yeah, it's a very tricky situation that he finds himself in. The car isn't performing as he would have hoped, and as it was at the start of the year, it was so strong. They were unbeatable. Now you're slightly on the back foot with the car, and let's be fair, Jenson Button has been there with the brawn, and he said, and personally, you're thinking about the World Championship, so you're thinking about not losing points in certain races, not making mistakes, and that's sometimes when mistakes happen." He says, "I will say, I'm the first person who made too many mistakes when I was fighting for my World Championship in the end, and I put myself under too much pressure, and I didn't handle that very well." Very open from Button. But he said, hopefully Oscar has learned from other people's failure, and you forget that he has a championship contender. At one point he was, Mark Webber, looking after him. He's been through difficult times and keeping him positive in this scenario. And up to this point, McLaren has opted to allow both drivers to race. I can't see how they cannot do that, continue that. With the issue is both drivers are going to race, even if you tell them not at this point. I mean, Lando's only 14 points behind. Up here. Piastri explained, when asked by Sky Sports F1 after the race, if the Woking outfit will have to adjust its approach. Piastri explained, "I don't know. I don't think so. We are still so incredibly tight. And we've both said we wanted an opportunity to try and fight for the championship because we deserve it. So I think it's far too close to start picking one over the other." I think it is. I mean, the issue you've got here is Lando Norris is the guy that's 14 points behind, but over the last 4 races, he is the in-form or the on-form driver at the McLaren camp, and Verstappen is just the on-form driver, full stop. But there we go. So now let's get into the racetrack. The track that is the Mexican Grand Prix. Oh, yes, it is. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the track guide, shall we? As you can see here, it almost looks a bit like Monza. I just realised that it always looks a bit like Monza, doesn't it? But there we go. So you've got obviously Sector 1, which is a massive DRS and the longest straight on the track, and then you've got like and then you got the chicane here, which is, to be fair, is really, really fast. You come down 4-5. If you remember last year, we had the hullabaloo with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. You come round, and this bit is really, really tight. The only other bit that's tighter, I think, is the stadium section. And then you come through turn 6 down to turn 7, and then it reminds you of like Silverstone in the USA with these really, really fast sweeping S's. Be interesting to see if they're flat in qualifying. I always find turn 10 and 11 maybe not, but we'll see. And then all the way down in the second DRS zone, which you don't really see much passing, into turn 12, which is the stadium section. As Martin Brundle would have you believe, it's the Mickey Mouse section, very much so. And then 12, 13, 14, you want to go on the power at 16, don't do what Bottas doesn't yeet it into the wall one year to stop Max Verstappen becoming the youngest pole position driver. And you get to do it lots more times. We will very much get into those track stats. But we've looked at the map. Let's have a look at the track guide, shall we? So I'm just going to take a drink. As you see the car going down the start-finish straight. This is where, obviously, the big DRS zone, this is where a lot of overtaking will take place. Now, it is quite wide, as you can see, and you can brake a lot later than you think, because this chicane, if you get the line right, is fairly fast. You clip the curves, you don't want to go completely off. You will have people potentially getting their lap times cancelled. You need to keep it nice and neat. for this next I don't think this is a DRS, so it depends on the year. But anyway, this is where obviously Lando Norris and Max Verstappen came a cropper with each other, fighting through. Now, you want to keep it nice and neat. This is going to be not a tyre killer, but you really need good traction and then absolutely nail it. Coming out of this corner, now we're into the S's that I've explained on the left. Yep, brake a tiny bit, and then it'll be interesting in these next few corners, these lefts, rights, and then we've got a right and a left. Is that whether the drivers can keep it flat, if not in qualifying, particularly in the race. We are at the next DRS, and we very rarely see any overtaking unless you make a mistake here. It's quite easy to outbrake yourself here in the stadium section and go off. We've seen it in qualifying before. We completely missed that apex. But on the power, nice and early. Brake, you want to brake earlier than that because we need to yeet it into the wall. And on the power to do it many more times indeed. So let's then talk about a few of the track facts, so to speak, shall we? And the length of the track is 4.304 kilometres. The race length is 305. So we're looking at 71 laps, a total of 17 turns. Now, it was opened all the way in 1959. It has obviously changed since then. But F1 first visited all the way back in 1963, and it's held 24 races. Now, track record, well, it wasn't with these cars. We're looking all the way back in 2019 with Max Verstappen on a 1:14.758, and then a lap record with Valtteri Bottas on a 1:18.741. When we look at race winners, there have been a few, and the event has been held since its return every year. 2015. We thought Mexico would go away because there's no Sergio Perez. So far, that's not been the case. 2020, it was cancelled for obvious reasons. But following increased financial support, the race took place and took on the official title of not the Mexican Grand Prix, the Mexico City Grand Prix in 2021. So in 2021, Max Verstappen became the first driver to have won more than 2 races at Mexico. He holds the most record with currently 5. Now, aside from that, I've already told you, Clark, Prost, Mansell, Hamilton and the other drivers who've recorded multiple victories, we're talking more than 1. And in 2018, Verstappen became the first driver to have taken back-to-back victories at this track. And he repeated the feat back in 22 and 23. Sadly, he didn't win in 24. That belonged to Carlos Sainz. Now, from the current grid, Verstappen, Hamilton, Sainz are the only drivers to have taken victory at the Autodromo. I'm going to get this wrong. Hermanos Rodriguez. Hamilton obviously winning there twice in 2016 and 2019. And Sainz, as we mentioned, securing his first victory at Mexico last year. I think that's Ferrari's last victory as well. Sadly, we have one Grand Slam, and no, it is not Max Verstappen. You've got to go all the way back to 1963. It is Jim Clark. He's the only driver to have recorded a Grand Slam at the circuit. He took pole, he set the fastest lap, and led every lap on his way to victory in the 1963 Mexican Grand Prix. Now in 2022, Red Bull set a new record for most wins in Mexico, with Max Verstappen's victory at the 22 Mexico Grand Prix being their 4th. They've obviously extended it to 5. We've got Lotus, McLaren, Williams, Mercedes and Red Bull are the only teams to have taken victories in consecutive seasons. Honda, though, thanks to Red Bull, is the most successful engine manufacturer with, once again, like Red Bull, those 5 wins. But it is an interesting one. Clark and Patrese hold the smallest and largest win margins in Mexico. Jim Clark, what was it, 101.1 seconds in 63, and funny enough in 67, 85 seconds. I mean, that's domination that even that Red Bull could dream of at the moment. The smallest win margin though was in 1991. Ricardo Patrese 1.3 seconds. Funnily enough, 2019 it was Lewis Hamilton with 1.7 seconds. In 2015 it was Rosberg with 1.9 seconds. Hamilton though holds the record for most podiums. In 22, Hamilton set a new record for most podium finishes in Mexico. He scored his second place finish was his 5th podium result, moving ahead of Ayrton Senna. Having said that, I'm pretty sure Max Verstappen now does. So I don't know. I don't know how much. But there we go. Anyway, moving on from that. That's pretty much our track guide. That's pretty much our track replay. But I want to get into. Let's now have a look at the drivers in Mexico. Our driver predictions. Who is going to win the Mexican Grand Prix? We'll get into that in a second. But who's not going to do good? And surprise, surprise, it's this guy here. Lance Stroll, I'm not really expecting much. If he ends up getting in Q3, I'll be surprised. I mean, he kind of teases it sometimes in the practice sessions, but really, it's Lando Norris that does it. Why is Lance Stroll in Formula 1? You could write a university thesis on it. It would all come up with the same reason, nepotism. Moving on. We've got Esteban Ocon, who's really not been that on form. Compared to his teammate, he's been really struggling. Why is that going to change in Mexico? I've seen no evidence that's going to change in Mexico. The issue is, we know how good Esteban Ocon was. He is a Grand Prix winner. Yeah, it might have been a tiny bit lucky, but the way he held off Sebastian Vettel at the Hungaroring in 2021 showed his class. So why? This is one of the enigmas that we're not talking about. I don't understand why Esteban Ocon is struggling so much. I do understand why Gasly and Colapinto are struggling so much. And I think now Colapinto is absolutely driving for his career, which is why I'm going to put him one ahead of Pierre Gasly. Having said that, the Alpine car is not particularly good, is it? It kind of sucks, doesn't it? Yeah, it absolutely does. So, next up, Mr. Colapinto. I mean, what can I say? The Alpine car is not particularly good. Should Franco Colapinto, he got the team orders, and I understand why he did it. He's fighting for his career. However, when you look on the other side of stuff in the United States, Franco Colapinto, his only chance to get a seat next year is with Alpine, the people he defied the team orders. So, is that really much of a help, Colapinto? Probably not. But I understand why you did it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I understand. But yeah, I think they're going to struggle. Next up, Bortoleto. A really, really good driver. He's not really done. I think maybe he did an FP1 session in F1 car Mexico. I'm not sure. But Hulkenberg is now the on-form driver. This is simply because Hulkenberg has such a good United States Grand Prix. I think he's found his form. And I think he's going to be better than Bortoleto. Yeah, so I do think Stake F1 may struggle a bit. Having said that, I'm hearing on the horizon there could be weather issues in Mexico. Rain? Surely not. Maybe. Having said that, we are this is Tuesday the 21st, so we are, best part of a weekish away still, at least for the race on Sunday. But next up, I think Lawson is going to continue his kind of struggles, especially compared to Hadjar. But I appreciate Hadjar did not really have a very good United States Grand Prix weekend, but VCarb didn't as a whole, and I still expect Hadjar to beat Lawson, sadly. Hulkenberg, yeah, again, I think Stake F1 may struggle to get some points, although they were very good in America. Now, when I say struggle, I'm talking like 11th, 12th, 13th, on the precipice of points, where if something funny happens, absolutely they probably will get points. Next up is Yuki Tsunoda, who I think is struggling again. As I've always said, it sounds like a stuck record, I know, but Red Bull just need to sort out their second car. They haven't. And it really hurts Yuki Tsunoda. I keep on saying it. The car's bespoke for Max Verstappen. I understand why it is. But it hurts Yuki Tsunoda. And what's also quite interesting is Red Bull, after Mexico, they've said now, they're going to confirm who the Red Bull drivers are going to be for 2026. And I think it's good that they do it early. But it's going to be really interesting. And next up, we have got Oliver Behrman, who had a really solid American race, in spite of Yuki Tsunoda trying to send him into Laguna Seca rather than Austin with his moving under braking move, which I still think was really bad. And he's doing really well, isn't he? He's showing potential. He's chipping away. It kind of reminds me a bit, albeit I don't think the car was as good, of Charles Leclerc and Alfa Romeo. Obviously before Ferrari signed him. Really, really, really solid. He's becoming now. We had a few teething problems, let's say, in the first half of the year with his silliness under red flags, but still. Now next up, I've got Fernando Alonso. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe top 11. He can certainly get a few points. What's going to be interesting is Mexico is quite high in the air, so the climate's quite high, so the air is going to be different. It affects the downforce differently. It affects the engines differently, and we know how good the Honda engines are, which may well prove me wrong about VCarb and be quite good. Hopefully it does, for VCarb's sake. But yeah, I think for Alonso, once again, kind of like Behrman and Hulkenberg and maybe Tsunoda, will be on the precipice, right on the edge of points, and hopefully will jump on any chance of getting in points. I wouldn't be surprised. And again with Hadjar, right on the precipice of those points. I think, yeah, potentially he can as well. I'd like to think I'm fairly confident. Maybe it's me being unfair that he's going to beat Lawson based on their form so far this year. But I think where Isaac Hadjar isn't, I think Liam Lawson, like Colapinto, is absolutely fighting for his career. So next up, I got Carlos Sainz. Obviously, I'd be very surprised if he beats Alex Albon. I still think that Williams is really good. With the right strategy, I think they're the fastest still of those midfield cars. And with the right strategy and the odd safety car, he may well get, I think he's capable of getting in the points. He's done it before from far back. But next up, we're going with Alexander Albon. I'll be really disappointed if he's not somewhere in Q3 and not somewhere in the points come the end of the race. I think that Williams should go well. It's been a slippier car in the past, but I feel this should be a good one for Williams. Now we get into the big boys in Kimi Antonelli. This is no slight on Kimi Antonelli. I just think as America, let's Singapore, be in the street circuit and at night. So it was really, really cool. The America track was really hot. I think Mexico potentially, as we know, is going to be hot. And I think that's going to have an effect on Mercedes. So it's almost very much a 2x2 here. Because next up is going to be George Russell. And again, I think if it's really hot, the Mercedes probably are potentially going to struggle. If it's a bit cool, I think they may do well. If it's wet, again, they may do well in the cooler conditions. And that's it. The Mercedes, over all the cars, maybe equal with the Ferrari. But in terms of the Mercedes, it's the most peaky car. It's either potentially one of the fastest cars or behind the top cars. It really chops and changes from each weekend, where Ferrari are sometimes there or thereabouts, but sometimes how fast they are depends on what Mercedes are doing as well. And next up, I've got Charles Leclerc, who I think is doing really well, but I can't help but feel we have an on-form Lewis Hamilton, who, if he doesn't mess anything up, I think Lewis Hamilton will be ahead of Leclerc come the end of the weekend. He had okay race pace in America. He did good in the sprint race. The sad thing for Lewis is he's missing FP1, which may have an effect on him slightly, but he's got 2 practice sessions rather than 1 to dial in that car, and he said he was feeling a lot more confident in the car, which is why I think he could do well. Wouldn't it be lovely if we get that first podium? But he's going to have to beat the next 3. He's going to have to beat the next 3 guys. And I've got Piastri on our podium in 3rd, simply because currently he's not the on-form driver he was in the first half of the year. Can he find his form? Absolutely. I thought he was absolutely going to bounce back in the USA and prove us all wrong. And he really hardly, it felt like, as a McLaren driver, he hardly turned up. So next up, I've got Lando Norris finishing 2nd again, simply because the Max Verstappen factor. Now, I think that McLaren is going to be fast. If they can get the setup right, absolutely. Now, if it's baking hot, then potentially that McLaren will be, I think, as fast, if not faster, than the Red Bull. There are rumours that Red Bull have another update between now and the end of the year. McLaren, I maybe wrongly reported that they had a flaw. I've obviously read that wrong, so I'm so sorry. So McLaren have said they're not really looking at any upgrades for the rest of the year, which is going to be a concern for both McLaren drivers. It is what they've got. It is still a fast car, but now I think everyone's kind of caught up with them, in particular Red Bull. It means getting that setup nailed even more. Can McLaren win races this year? Absolutely they can. The only reason why I'm choosing this guy is because he's already won 5 Mexican Grand Prix. And the Honda engine that they're having at the moment seems to really like the high altitude. And in previous times, the aerodynamics of the Red Bull was fairly okay too. Albeit, it was McLaren and Lando Norris that had the fastest car here last year. But I do think Max Verstappen is going to absolutely drive out of his skin. With 40 points still behind, I think he's still kind of driving with nothing to lose. He's over a win away from that lead of the championship. Now, if he is within a win, we might see a slightly different Max. But here, I think it's going to be a Max that potentially is going to take risks. But he's got to be careful. He takes risks against one of the McLaren drivers, and the other one wins it. And we have 2 DNS for Verstappen and a McLaren driver, with the other one winning it. That's 25 points. Championship over? Not necessarily, but championship definitely in the very hard expert mode, I think, at that point. Whether it's kind of like in the media mode now for Max Verstappen, but Mexico is going to be so interesting. And I'm really, really I'm absolutely looking forward to the Mexican Grand Prix. I can't wait. It's going to be interesting. I just hope it's a more exciting race than America was. And here we go. As you can see, the track is across my face. The track is across my face. It is official. Let's get rid of that, shall we? So if you made it to the end, thank you very much. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. But at the end of the day, you just watching this is more than enough for us. So thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. Until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you for watching. But above all else, stay safe.